welcome back to the Blonde Highlights podcast. Today is going to be a little bit of a different episode. We thought it would be great to start out the year by interviewing each other and so that you could get to know us on a much deeper level. And so for today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing Kris. And trigger warning, we're going to get into some really deep topics. Some of the trigger warning topics we're talking about is death, sexual abuse, abortion, addiction, eating disorders, and suicide. So buckle up, but I hope you're ready for this amazing story that Kris is about to share.
And I just wanted to put out my own disclaimer there. I am going to be sharing a story of something that's happened over the past few years involving my ex-boyfriend, Sam. And I just want to put it out there that I'm not in any way trying to paint him in a negative light, or I'm not trying to get too deep into what happened, especially out of respect for his family and friends who I genuinely still adore. I just want to share my experience because this whole experience has impacted me greatly over the past 6 years, and I feel like I'm finally at a place where I am able to speak about it, and I've had to learn that it's okay to talk about it, and that just because I am speaking about it, it doesn't mean that it's any disrespect to him. But I just wanted to put that out there, is that I just want to share my experience and how this all impacted me directly.
Okay, and we're going to start out on a slightly lighter note, and I want to know a little bit about your career, and I think people would love to know about your career as a model and how that all got started. And so how did you get into modeling, and how did you know it was what you wanted to do with your life?
So when I was younger, I always just had these really big ideas of moving to Hollywood. I always loved the idea of the glamour and the glitz. I was always told growing up, like, oh, you should model, you should model. And I think that that's kind of what stuck in my head. And I also really loved girly things. Like, I loved actresses like Mary-Kate and Ashley. I used to love watching Clueless. And I just really loved the prettiness and glamorous lifestyle that they portrayed. When I never really thought that it was something that I could do because I was always like the bigger, chubby girl. And although plus size modeling came about a little bit when I was a teenager, but not really a lot, I decided in my early 20s that I would put my photos on Model Mayhem. And I actually got scouted there. And my mother agent had her wing, and the rest has been history.
My God, I was on Model Mayhem too with my hair portfolio back in the day.
And back in the day, it was a time. Model Mayhem, it opened up a lot of opportunities for people. It was its own world.
That is insane. So I know that you have modeled all over the world, like all over the world. And so what was that like, just modeling in all these parts in different places?
For me, especially coming from a small town, it was a really surreal feeling getting to do it. My first big job out of town was actually in Milwaukee, but traveling to Europe and other different parts of the world, it was a very surreal feeling. I loved the adventure, the excitement, the unknown of it. I didn't get to see everywhere I went because a lot of the time I spent just in the airport, hotel, or on set. But to me, it was just always so exciting, and I never took it for granted. Every opportunity, even if it wasn't like a very well-paid job, I was like, yeah, I'll do it, just for the opportunity to travel and go somewhere different.
That's amazing. And what were some of the challenges that you have faced from being like in the modeling industry?
Well, I mean, I think the title speaks for itself, modeling. But I mean, I think it's a lot of self-doubt, obviously, body image, eating disorders, as well as just kind of sort of feeling like a pick-me girl at times, because, you want an opportunity so bad, and then just like waiting and having to, sit back and hope that you get a job. That's always been a huge struggle. And I've just kind of had to learn, like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And for me also too, learning that the competition isn't personal. I don't look at it as a competitive sport like I used to when I was younger.
That's amazing. And when you moved to Australia for a big period of time and you were kind of like bi-global, like I remember you like just popping around. Like you were like, okay, I'm leaving Australia. I'm going to stop by LA, New York, like do all the North America stuff. And then you would see your family. And then you remember going to Europe after that. And then back through and then back to Australia. And you were really kind of living by global for a while. Which is an interesting top term, by global versus by coastal. What were some of the differences? But what were some of the differences in modeling in Australia versus North America and Europe?
I think Australia, every set that I went on, you could sense that it was a big deal. Like it was, the photo shoots were respected differently. I feel like in North America and even Europe, it's kind of just like a run of the mill, like, okay, another photo shoot, another photo shoot. I feel like in Australia, it was very much like, this is the craft, this is the art of it. There was a little bit more thought, attention to detail with certain things. I feel like it was, every photo shoot was seen as like a different opportunity. Don't get me wrong, there were some of those ecom days where it was like, you know, day in, day out. But overall, I feel like they really appreciated the opportunities of being able to have the photo shoot. Like I genuinely felt that on most of the photo sets that I was on.
Okay. And okay, so let's take this now into more of a personal way. I'm going to throw my glasses on. We're going to get real serious and we're going to talk about the trauma. Okay.
Oh my God, we're okay. Oh my gosh, be prepared. We're gonna unleash it all.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, like tell us about who Kris was as a young child and a young adult. What were you like before modeling, and were there any struggles?
So when I was a young child, I was just like a menace. I was really just excited. I was filled with life. I was fun, I was silly, and that all went into my teenage years. My teenage years, I was, like I said, just a menace. Loved to push boundaries. I loved to see what I could get away with. I knew that I could get away with a lot, and I took advantage of that. I loved getting into trouble, but there were some dark days, sadly, in my teenage years. I feel like I didn't even realize how much I was struggling in my teenage years. So sadly, when I was about 14, my dad had been faced with an addiction problem, and that really just changed the course of my family. My parents were on and off for a few years while my dad was battling, and eventually our family just separated. And when that happened, that's really when my eating disorder had triggered. So I was bulimic, and it was about body image, but it was also, after speaking to my doctor, it was also about control. So she also said when I was younger, I was sexually abused when I was 3 by a family friend. And she said that the mix of my sexual abuse, as well as now my world with everything that's going on around me with my dad and the way that that's changing, that my bulimia gave me a sense of control and a sense of power over my body and my mind. And my bulimia eventually just, it made me very sick. I was losing hair in school. Teachers were noticing, making comments, but eventually I just kind of stopped. I didn't get real treatment for it. I just sort of stopped. I remember my granddad coming to me and asking me to stop because it was getting that bad. And after seeing him crying, I just stopped.
Yeah.
But there were definitely some struggles. And then I went into my 20s and I was just like a party girl. I loved drinking. Even in my teenage years, I wouldn't say that it was a huge problem, but I would use alcohol as a way to medicate myself, and I would binge drink. It wasn't sometimes about just going out and having a good time. It was like, how blackout drunk can I get? How much can I escape? And that is also something that I brought into my 20s. And there were some bad habits. I never touched drugs because of my dad's addiction. I never wanted that for myself. And he warned me that I would be an addict because I have a very addictive personality. But I was just like a fun party girl, really.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I remember there was a lot of substance abuse problems in my father's family, and my dad sat me down one day and said, "You got to know that there's a very high likelihood of you being addicted to substances, and like it's just in our blood. So be aware." Yeah. And it's great that you had the knowing to know to not dabble with that. Because I think a lot of people go either two ways. You know, they're afraid to ever touch it or they end up diving straight into it. So,
Well, I think my dad's addiction scared me so much because he had it all. So much money. He was loaded. Money, power, big men in the community, and then nothing. Lost it all. So I think seeing my dad's downfall really took a toll and really just put in my mind, like, I cannot have that for myself.
yeah. Well, I'm proud of you. So, when you moved to LA, you were 28 years old. Why did you wait so long to take that leap?
So my early 20s were blacks. They were a blur. They were so much fun. But my mid 20s were a little bit of a rough go. I was modeling, but I wasn't full-time modeling. And opportunities were starting to come up. And I actually had the opportunity to move to LA prior to when I did, but I didn't take it because I didn't believe in myself. And I didn't think that I could do it. I didn't want to leave my hometown, whatever. But at 28, I just felt like I didn't have anything. I feel like I was having a real awakening moment of just, you know what, I'm 28, finally left a relationship that was just so toxic. I was in such a toxic relationship in my mid-20s. And sadly, him and I had a pregnancy. And I made the decision to have an abortion. And it wasn't something that I was proud of. It was very much something that I really struggled with. But I knew that I couldn't do it where I was living, the life that I was living, being with him. I couldn't do it. And I went through with the abortion, and that was such a traumatic experience. I tried to stop it when it started, and they had given me an Ativan, and they go through all these questions with you. And then they took me in the room and they like put me on the bed, whatever. And they're starting it, and I was starting to yell, stop. And I was like shaking my arms and moving my arms, and it was almost like I had an awakening moment. Like, I don't want this to happen. And the nurse just put a mask over me and just told me that I had to be quiet because there were other patients in the hall, like in the room beside us. So that itself was like so traumatic. And I felt a lot of loss after I did that. It really put into perspective that like you really don't know until you're faced and being in a situation. Like, again, abortion is something that I just never thought that I would do. And I really struggled with my decision, although I knew it was the best. I just, sometimes I even still have the thought like, oh, what if? But at that point in my life, after I finally got away from that ex-boyfriend and was like rebuilding my life a bit, the opportunity came up. My friend Hannah was like, look, my room's available in Santa Monica. And I had went down to a casting, and I asked a Zoltar machine if I should move. And when I was standing at the Zoltar machine, because I was on Santa Monica, or where's it, Venice Beach.
Yeah.
And a lady was wearing Canada shorts. And I was like, you're from Canada? And she was like, yeah. She's like, I moved here like 20 years ago, best decision of my life. And Hannah and I just looked at each other like, my God, like this is a sign. Because the whole day I was like, I just need a sign and I'll pull the trigger and make the decision to move here. And at the Zoltar machine, I met this woman and she told me it was the best decision of her life. So then and there I was like, you know what? I've got nothing to lose. I have no money, no anything. I'm going. And I went.
Yeah. And I know it's hard to talk about abortion and making that decision. And I know that.
I also thought too, I was like, I've made this grand decision in my life. I think I just owe it to myself to, if I'm going to make a decision like that, then I should try to make the most out of my life to help make that decision make even more sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting at that time because in astrology, there's this thing called your Saturn return, and it kind of flips your life upside down. And that generally happens when you're 28. So it makes sense that like life can be flipped around when your Saturn return hits. And I mean, what an amazing sign while you were there in Venice Beach. And that's just,
right?
Yes, it's always like fate.
I was literally in the ocean and I was asking my grandparents, because my granddad, I was so close with him growing up. He was passing as I was going through all of my abortion stuff. And I really struggled with that as well, happening at the same time and whatever. And I just remember being in the beach and just looking up and just being like, give me a sign. And like one was literally slapped on my face. Like you couldn't ignore that. So I do believe that was a big sign from him and God and faith.
Amazing. So what was it like coming from a small town when you first moved to LA?
Okay, so for me, it was like super cool and I was so excited and everything was new. I felt like an alien because I lived in a small town, but I never lived in a city, but I acted or almost behaved like I've never seen a city before. Looking back, it's like, girl, like you had this 40 minutes down the road in Toronto, but I never wanted to live in Toronto. I had no desire. So to me, it was not only experiencing a new country, it was also experiencing city life. So the mix of that was really surreal. I was really trying, but I was really behind on everything. I mean, didn't have this style. I didn't have the makeup. I had to learn, like my agency was like, you need to learn how to do like LA makeup and we need to get you some LA looks because, you know, what I was doing at home was not what was accessible in LA. There was an adjustment period there. I tried really hard making connections. Obviously, I met you, Deb, but I made some other friends who are like lifetime family friends for me and so close to my heart. But there was also a lot of people that were just disingenuous, just only wanted to hang out with me to see what they could get from me. And so I really struggled with that. But I tried to make the most of it. I loved that I could have the best tacos I've ever had, like just like 2 blocks from me. I mean, I was living in Santa Monica. It was a really nice town at the time. And yeah, I had a great time, but kind of finding my footing and getting into the group. I was working so much. So I think that helped with the adjustment, but also to kind of not help, but kind of caused a little bit of friction between me and other models who were a little bit like, well, this bitch just came out of nowhere. Now she's booking all the jobs. But I didn't even realize how busy I was. I just thought, oh, this is how they all work here, you know? But it was definitely an adjustment period. And looking back, I feel a bit silly over some of the things that I thought were new that really weren't.
Yes, I remember Benny's Tacos.
Benny's Tacos. Like, that'll never get old to me.
Yeah. We met on an e-com job in like 2016. I was doing hair and you were modeling and I gave you a little like braid headband.
Yes. Oh my God. I remember that shoot vividly. And I was like 20 years old shooting prom. And I was like, okay, here I am. And then remember the other model, she was like actually like preparing for her prom. And I was like, okay, here we go. Like, but yeah, we met pretty early on, which was nice.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed like some of your friends that you had. And I remember our little walks to the beach at night with a bottle of wine and sitting in the sand.
Smoking so many cigarettes. But I also did struggle in the sense too of like, as much fun as I was having, I was homesick, but I didn't want to admit it. Like I was really homesick. I was used to always seeing my family and my close friends. And now I really had nobody around me. Hannah was always gone for work. And so that was a bit of adjustment, but it was a very fun time in my life.
Yes, I can see that. And so other than like modeling, like what led you to Australia for those years?
Okay. So Australia, most of us know, I had a boyfriend in Australia. So him and I started a long distance relationship and it actually started before I moved to LA and it wasn't anything serious. It was just kind of chatting here and there. And then far into my move, I made the decision. I got booked on a job there. So I got placed in an agency there. And I didn't want to be that girl that was like, I'm going to go there and see him. I was like, if I get an opportunity and I end up there, then fine. And I put that out there and I ended up there and I ended up getting a boyfriend. And I ended up in Australia on a partner visa and I was living with my boyfriend, Sam.
And what was that like? What was your personal life like there, being so far away from like your friends and your family?
So my Personal life was really cool. Sam had introduced me to a lot of his friends and his family, who are honestly, to this day, some of the nicest and kindest people that I've ever met. But I also had a really cool group of girlfriends. I had a great apartment. I loved our location. I had a cute dog. I had a great personal life there. Didn't really struggle at this point with being so far away from home because I had already adjusted to being far away from home through living through LA. But I did struggle. So unfortunately, when I was in Australia, my dad passed away. So he had a heart attack. And that's when I struggled with my personal life in Australia because I had to fly back to Canada and be there. First of all, I had to wait a couple of days before I could get a flight and go. So being so far away from my family at such like a traumatic time was really hard. But I was also doing my partner visa, which meant that if you left the country during that time, you would have to restart your process. And during that time, I couldn't work. So I had to leave and I stayed home for a few months. And then when I went back, I restarted my visa. And my personal life, I was lucky enough to have enough support around me, and because I had to have some time off work, but I was fine. My personal life was great.
Yes. And I remember you would come back and visit, and we had done this NAMI walk, which is the National Association of Mental Health, something I'm messing up what the initials stand for. But we did this like walk together in downtown LA, and you started this blog and like Instagram page called F the Stigma. What led to some of your advocacy in mental health?
So my advocacy in mental health originally kind of started with my dad. It was always something that was close to my heart, even before F the Stigma. But Sam had battled with some mental health. He had mental illness. He was battling depression. And that was something that I knew very early on in the relationship. And for me, I didn't care. I knew how bad it was, but I didn't care. I just accepted it and I loved him. And in my eyes, I genuinely thought, I was like, well, if we're together, it's fine. I'll be able to save him. Like, I will fix him. And, maybe that is something that I shouldn't have done because, a lot of people would see that and be like, oh, there's some mental health here, maybe set some boundaries and whichever. But for me, I was like, no, this is fine. I feel like I was kind of just accustomed to my life up in arms. So it was nothing to me really. And I just wanted to, I really saw firsthand the strength and power of the disease. And I wanted to spread awareness. I wanted other people to know that it's okay if you are struggling, and it's okay if you have a mental illness. It doesn't fully define you, and it doesn't make you a bad person, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's more common than you think. And I really wanted to lean into the modeling community and show these beautiful women and people, and people who people would look at and be like, wow, they really have it together, and wow, they've got it all. But it's like, well, no, I'm struggling with this. And I wanted to create a space that was freeing and inspiring. And, I hate the term safe space, but a safe space for people to come and really feel included. So it was his mental health, I think, that I just became a full advocate for.
And what was it like living with someone who deeply struggled with mental illness?
Honestly, it was bittersweet. So seeing someone that you love so much struggle the way that they did was so hard. And it was awful to watch. And, there's times where there was like this helplessness where I was like, I can't do anything. And this was, not even at its worst. But then there was the sweetness side of it when you would see someone who is struggling doing so well and being able to thrive, and seeing them just at their best and optimistic and hopeful. And that was really beautiful to see. It was beautiful when you had those patches of just like not seeing him struggle. Again, even when it was his like dark times, it didn't fully affect me. Like sometimes it was exhausting. I'll admit that. It was exhausting because some days I didn't know what type of day I was going to have. But I just loved him so much that it didn't bother me. Like I was okay with it. And I just felt like and especially at this time in my life, I was just this ray of sunshine. I had this zest for life. I loved life. I loved living. I loved the life I was living. So for me, I mean, I was living in a whole new world with whole new possibilities and this new boyfriend. So for me, I was just like, we got this. Like I never thought that it would ever progress, and I always just thought like it's gonna be fine. And so I would live my life and be like, everything's gonna be fine, and I would do things to take care of myself, and that was that.
Yeah, and it is such a natural instinct for a lot of women to want to fix someone or to think that I can help them through this and I can, take on too much of a load with that. And during this time as your friend, I didn't know everything, but I knew you as this ray of sunshine and this positivity that like lit up rooms, and I could see you struggling secretly of what was going on. And I was worried at times, but I thought everything was fine. And I knew that we all like to think that we can help everybody or fix them. But your breakup seemed out of the blue when that all happened. So like what happened?
So, I mean, again, I'm not going to get into too many details. What's done is done, but he did step outside the relationship, and there were messages that were sent to other women, including other models. And I was approached, and when this happened, a woman had sent me a message, and it all kind of came out, and I had approached him. And when I approached him, it was very much brought to light that his intention in doing so was to start to push me away. And from that point, that's kind of, his mental health took a turn. And for 8 months, it was this ongoing journey of him in and out of the hospital, him being at home. And I, at this point, had to take everything that happened in our relationship and relationship-wise and put it to the side and focus on just getting him better. Because even though that he had done something that really hurt me and broke my trust, I still just was just like, well, we can get you better. Like, it's going to be fine, And it was just, I just went into survival mode of no matter what happens between him and I in a relationship point, I'm here and I'm going to continue to support him. And I'm going to do everything in my power to continue to, in my eyes, just fix it. Like, just be fine with it. And so months went on, and it was a lot of in and out of the hospital, and there was a lot up in the air and unknowns, and it was a really stressful time. But I kept plugging away at work. I took a little bit of time off, but then I went back to work, and I tried to just work through it. And an incident had happened, and my family was like, you need to come home. And at this point now, he had been back in the hospital, and I went in to see him to tell him that I was going home, and he broke up with me. So at that point, I already knew our relationship was over, but neither of us had said it out loud. So when that happened, I was just like, all right, like, I guess I'm going home. And I went home for a few months, and I went to my mom's. It was like during Christmas and stuff. And then I went back to Australia in the new year, and things had happened over our break from one another, like the physical break. And it was very clear on my end that like it was over. And then when I went back to Australia, I was only there for like a month and a half or something, because I was leaving again to go, I think I was going to Europe and then like a family vacation. So I was like going back home. And during that time he had given me the apartment, and I was there on my own. And then he had come home and we had a talk, and we just knew, like, right now in this time, like, this isn't going to work. So then for 2 weeks, him and I lived together, and it was like all of a sudden he was back to normal. And that was something wild for me to witness. Not only just because it was like, oh my God, he's finally okay. Like, he's finally doing things, like, not fully okay, but like doing things that were more Sam and more him. And as happy as it made me, it also kind of broke me a bit too, because I'm like, well, love how he's being like this now that, like, we've decided we're not together, you know? So it was just like a total mind fuck, but I just tried to play through it because I just wanted there to be peace between us. I still had a love for him, and he took me to the airport, and he was like, you know what, like, this is our life, we can do what we want, whatever. And that was the last I saw him.
Yeah, and when you were kind of almost being selfless in that time to help him, even though things were not great, and how did all of this affect your own mental health?
Girl, it was wild. I tried to really hard to put on a strong front. But again, my eating disorder flared up, I guess we'll call it. And it was like at its peak because I could not control what was happening around me. My whole world, I felt like, had just been pulled out from underneath me. And like, I moved there essentially for him. We just got our partner visa. And like a month later, we're, you know, all this stuff is coming to surface. I was very anxious, riddled with anxiety. And when I went home after he broke up with me in the hospital, and I went home for that bit, I was exhibiting signs of PSTD. So I was randomly crying. I was just like lashing out, yelling. It just wasn't good. So I just kind of pushed it all to the side because I wasn't really taking care of myself, because I was like, well, like, I was putting so much energy into taking care of him, but I didn't mind. It was my decision to live like that, and that's how I wanted to live.
Yeah. And when you close that chapter and now you're in this whole other chapter of your life and to, you know, modern day where we are now. So after leaving Australia and the breakup, how did you end up back in Canada?
Like, girl, what the hell? How'd you get here? Like I said, so Sam took me to the airport. I was only supposed to be gone for like short term. And COVID happened. And I was in LA at the time. I saw you. We hung out. And then it was like the day after we hung out, it was like Canada, my government was calling all the Canadians home. And at that point, I felt like I was really faced at a crossroad. I knew it was either I go home to my mom's and be with my mom, and, you know, there was no real talk of shutdown or anything like that, but we all knew something was happening and things were already closing and whatever. And then it was, or do I go back to Australia? And I knew for the both of us, I knew selfishly for myself, I couldn't go because I knew that it would just be too hard on me. And I was so angry because more things had happened since leaving. And I also knew that if I went back during this time, then it wouldn't have been easy on him. And I just made the decision to just go back to my mom's. And then I just ended back at my hometown for COVID.
And what's crazy is I think at that time, at the beginning of 2020, when everything was shutting down, we thought this was going to be like 2 weeks. We thought it was going to be like a week. Mm-hmm. And it was so crazy that, you know, it turned into the situation that it turned into. But how did you meet your now husband now that you're back in Canada?
So I technically met Michael when I was 7 years old. He walked into my house naked when he was 2. That is a true story. But Michael and I grew up on the same street. Our mom's best friends. I'm 5 years older, so I didn't really hang out with him. But during the pandemic, he was back home because he had already been out of his long-term relationship for a long time. And he was living at his mom's, and he just kind of kept coming around, messaging me like, oh, let's go for a walk, or let's do whatever. And then finally one day I was just like, okay, whatever. And I went for a walk and I hung out with him. And then we just kind of started this friendship, and it was so refreshing being around him. I really realized, I realized before that I was no longer in love with Sam. I had a love for him, but I wasn't in love with him. And I realized that even more when I was hanging out with Michael, because I started seeing sides of myself that I hadn't seen in a long time. I was laughing so much. I was just being stupid. I didn't care about things. Like, I felt like I was a teenager dating because we were both at our mom's house and things like that. And he just brought out this side of me. And eventually I just kind of was like, okay, let's things. And it was really scary, but I just had this wholehearted trust in him, which surprised me. I truly didn't think that I would ever trust again, really. I know that's what everybody says after a relationship. I've got trust issues, but it happened. And yeah, we just kind of got together.
Yeah, and I remember, okay, there was a couple months ago, we were at a party. It was like in Hollywood. There was a lot of like Hollywood people, and they were like, how'd you meet your husband? And you told this story, and everyone was like, oh my God, this is a Hallmark movie. You're back at home with your parents, and you met, like, everyone was like, this is straight out of a movie.
Yeah.
But what was it like?
The world was ending. Yeah, the world was ending. We were home. It was nice. And it was really refreshing. Like, he really opened my eyes to like a new life, which was really nice.
Yeah. But what was it like going into a relationship with someone that had kids?
Okay, honestly, I'll say it. I never thought it would be something that I would be able to do. I never, like, especially like in my 20s, if I was to go on a date with someone and I saw like a crib or like knew that they had kids, I'd be like, ew, I'm out. Like, not my responsibility. But I feel like because I already knew his kids just from our families knowing each other and being around his kids just naturally without even any connection to Michael. I mean, I have pictures on an old phone of Aiden probably a week before I moved to LA. And I went to go visit his mom to say bye, and Aiden was over at the house. And I have baby photos. Like, I feel like because there was like that comfort, and because they just loved me even before we started dating, like anytime I would walk by, they would say hello and want to hang out with me, or they would come to the door for me. And it was just like a very natural thing that happened.
Yeah. And
so it was,
sorry.
It was just like an easy transition with them. Like,
yeah. What was your engagement story like? Like, how did the engagement go?
So we got engaged. We had been living together, so we moved things fast. But we had been living together, and Michael took me away on this like really romantic like winter getaway. And at this time we had started the business together, our catering company, but it was really nothing. And he was still working at the restaurant that he was. So I didn't know, but he had been tucking away so much savings, or anything that he was getting, he was doing everything to like buy a ring for me. And we went away on this like winter getaway, and he just proposed, and I had no clue it was coming. And it was so cute because he was so nervous that when he proposed, he opened up the ring box and said, "Merry Christmas."
Oh my gosh. And okay, so as your friend, I know what happens next, and this is such a tough topic, and I think it's best that instead of me asking the question, you just go ahead and tell us what happened next.
So buckle up. I'm gonna sip my water for a sec. Yeah. So this is something that I've never really been open about, and I guess like I've never really spoken about it, and I feel like it's because of fear of not wanting to say the wrong thing. But like my therapist said that, this is a part of my life and a part of my journey, and it's okay to share my perspective of things, especially when there's such a heavy impact. So Michael and I got engaged on December 20th, and we wanted to wait to tell everybody, including the boys who we told on Christmas morning. And it was so beautiful. They were like so excited. They were like ready for it all. They loved the idea of it. And so on Christmas, that's when I posted like an engagement video. And, I went and we had Christmas and very happy time. And it was Boxing Day, and I had seen Sam's page, his Instagram page. And when I went to his page, I saw that there was a birth and death date, and then a photo of him and George, who was our dog. And it just said, George, I love you. Thank you. Something like that. And right away, like I knew, but until it was confirmed, it wasn't confirmed, So I had looked at the photo and I saw comments from some people that I knew were his family friends, and they were just saying really nice things. My first instinct was to call my aunt, who I knew had his mom on Facebook. I didn't have Facebook, I don't think. And I was like, has she posted anything? And there was nothing. So I decided to call a friend who was his best friend's wife, who I actually formed a really special relationship with. She's a beautiful person. And I called her on Instagram and she didn't answer. But then like a minute later called back. And as soon as I saw the call, like I knew. So I just said, hey, I went on Sam's page and I saw everything and I don't know what's going on. And she was just like, he's gone. Like he's gone, Kay. And I still feel like I can like hear her voice saying it. So right then I was sitting on my bed and I just like looked around and I was just like complete panic. I feel like I was just like, what happened? It was like shock, panic, and disbelief all in one. And my next reaction was just call his brother. And I called his brother and they confirmed everything and gave me the details. And they just wanted to wait to tell me because it happened so soon after I posted my engagement. So they didn't want to bring down my happy time, which is very on brand for them because they're just lovely people. So all of a sudden, the biggest high of my life soon turned into one of the biggest lows of my life. And from that period until his funeral was just awful. Like I didn't even think of our engagement. And, Michael, like he was obviously so upset, even though, Sam was my ex-boyfriend and whatever. Like nobody wants to know that somebody does something like that. And he just kind of gave me my space a little bit. But I knew that he was hurting for the fact of it being our engagement time too. And now all of a sudden, like that was taken from, But that week, I was just trying everything I could to get to the funeral. I just wanted to be there. I wanted to say goodbye. I could not believe that something that I tried so hard to stop happened. And unfortunately, I couldn't say goodbye. I couldn't go to the funeral, and I had to watch the funeral from my living room, which was awful. My family came over, but being so far away from it was so hard. And I just think even though our relationship was done and even though our relationship was over and there was no more love between us, there was a special love and a bond that we shared. And just to know now that it was just gone and I couldn't even get proper closure. So his sister was so kind and she read a goodbye letter that I had written to him at a ceremony that they had, I guess, at his cremation. So that's how I said goodbye to him. And it was just a downward spiral from there, really.
And this is a kind of a harsh question to ask, but how did that feel of his suicide happening so close to your engagement and posting your engagement?
I felt like it was my fault. I just remember going to my mom's, and I remember it was like the next day or something. My mom had came over that night when we found out. And then I had gone to my mom's, and I just remember like she was telling me it wasn't my fault, but I was screaming at her, like just like then saying things like his blood is on my hands, like it's my fault. Like I contacted his dad and I apologized, and I was like, like it's my fault. He reassured me it wasn't. But at that point, I didn't care about my engagement really. At that point, I was just so devastated. It fucking devastated me. And dealing with the idea of it's literally my fault. And I felt that there was this responsibility because people would say to me, like even when I was living in Australia, like, oh, he's doing so much better with you around and whatever. And then even after he passed, people were like, oh, well, you gave him extra years. And it's just like, it really does put this like heavy burden of responsibility of me of like, okay, I guess it really is my fault because if I went home, then he wouldn't have done this. If I had just decided to go to Australia and not Canada, then he would still be here. I would have been able to save him. I would have been able to fix him. And I was fixated on that. And then I just felt super fucked up that now I have to go through this happy time of planning my wedding. And like, he just did this and that's that.
Yeah. And I mean, to go through that and to feel that kind of blame and all of those things. And, and it's hard to think about yourself in that situation. And what was it like planning this wedding with this dark cloud lingering? And how did that affect your relationship with your husband, your now husband, and your family?
It was awful, to be honest. I think the only part of my wedding planning that I liked was my dress experience. I remember just being so frustrated because what happened was it happened, the funeral happened, and in my head I was like, this show must go on. But what I wasn't realizing is that like I cannot perform, but I tried and I would just push through the days and just try to keep it pushed down. Because anytime I would even think about it, I was like, I can't go there. And I didn't want to change my date. Like my date the whole time of us was July 2nd, 2022. It was 2 years to the day of me realizing that I had feelings for Michael. It was special to us. And I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm not going to let this ruin my time. I'm not. But I was so frustrated because that spark in me, that like lust for life, that bubbly, happy, just a so optimistic version of myself was like dead too. It was just gone. And it would frustrate me because I was trying so hard to do something that was like so happy in my life. And I just couldn't be happy doing it. And I was so frustrated because I just didn't want this to be happening. And I just didn't want to be feeling the feelings that I was feeling, and I didn't want to admit that I was upset about my dead ex-boyfriend when I was now planning my wedding. And I just had to plan, and I was very lucky that Michael is the man that he is. I mean, he's not perfect, but in this situation, like he really just anything that he could do, he did. Anything, even without me asking, not even knowing I needed it. He just did it. And I did everything to push him away. I just started pushing everybody away. And after my wedding, there was drama in my wedding planning and whatever, but I feel like also too, because of the headspace that I was in, it kind of affected all of that as well. And then after my wedding, I just pushed everyone away. And I didn't talk to people for a really long time.
Yes. And so how did this tragedy affect your work, and how did you overcome it and rebuild your life to where you are now?
I quit. I tried, and during this whole time I put on so much weight. I was trying to model, and which is fine. but I was trying to model in like a bigger body, and I was showing up to set and I wasn't mentally there. I wasn't ready. I was so anxious, so angry. My therapist had said that I was living in a state of hypervigilance. I was trying, but not trying, and not realizing that you shouldn't be doing this right now. Like, you need to stop. Like, the show needs to stop. Kris, sit down for a few minutes and collect yourself. And I didn't realize that. And I just tried to push through it like nothing was wrong. And then I went to my mother agent. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm nothing and whatever. And after that, that's actually when I started the therapy, was after that. And my therapist was like, you just need to understand that like everything that you're feeling is normal. And I feel like I really needed to hear that. And I feel like I needed to come to a place where I could accept that I was grieving. And I needed to accept that I was really upset about what happened, because I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to face it. I was in so much denial. So once I decided that, okay, I didn't even know how to grieve him, because I was angry, I was sad, I was mad, I was confused. What was our relationship? Was any of it even real? What was anything? Why would you do this? Why didn't you say goodbye? Was with you for how long and by your side, and you didn't say goodbye to me? And that made me so angry. But then I was also like, well, why do I even care that I want a goodbye? Who gives a shit? And we weren't even together. Like, it was such an internal battle every single day. And I did have a letter from him. And he sent me this letter with my belongings when it came. And he told me that it was there. And I read it years ago when I found them at his apartment during one of the times that I was there. And then I just didn't open it. But then when he passed, I opened it. And it was different. It was longer. And I remember it being different. Because I remember making a comment and kind of like a joke. Like, when I first read the letter in Australia, I was like, that's it. But I had to face all of this stuff, and I had to admit to myself that this fucking hurts, and this is going to continue to hurt. And the only way that you can do this, whether it was your fault, whether it wasn't your fault, the only way that you're going to be able to continue to do this is just to move on and just accept. And you have to accept that this happened, and you have to accept that you have to live your life now, and you have to, like, my spark was gone. Like I said, I had no optimism in me, and I just had to accept, like, you're a different person now because of this, but you need to take care of yourself now. My eating disorder was awful. You could smell blood on my breath, and it was my brother who finally called me out on it. It was like, you need to stop. I couldn't stop. I had like no control. I just spiraled, and I hated everyone. And I just couldn't believe that my actions could have led to this. And I finally was just like, you got to get your shit together. You're a stepmom now, and you're a wife, and you have an amazing husband. And it affected our relationship greatly. Like, again, thank God Michael's like a saint, but I wasn't a nice person. I wasn't a nice person at all. I was so mean to him. But the kids, I truly believe that the kids are like my lifesaver and like my saving grace, because they got me through so much of this without even knowing. I was able just to have these breaks of dealing with this and just be with the kids and shut my brain off. And I'm truly so blessed for those boys to have come into my life, because they, I think, inevitably like saved me from like an even deeper spiral. I don't know. Yeah. But I knew I had to take care of myself, and I just started doing things that were good for myself. I started working out to get my mental health refreshed. And once I started doing that, I think it switched something in my brain, and I started going, and I was randomly signed with Ford Models New York. And it was just like, oh, okay. And I did more therapy and then put the work in. And once I accepted and admitted to myself that I was sad, things just changed.
Yeah, and it's interesting us starting this podcast because, I had gone through a lot of stuff and I had to put my career on hold. You put your kind of career on hold. And then we both had these big moments. I started at this big new salon that was a huge upgrade career wise and to be mentored by them. And you had signed with this Ford modeling agency. And so we're really kind of just like rebuilding our lives at the time. And I'm so glad we're able to do this together. And even in the year, it's been a little under a year of us doing this, I have seen that spark and that happiness come back to your eyes. And I've seen improvement in like your level of happiness. And so what steps have you taken to prioritize your happiness now? And how do you handle obstacles that come your way now?
I'm just kind of living by the mantra of like, you can't control everything. And that's what I had to learn in my eating disorder and battling my eating disorders. You can't control it. So, you know what? I'm healed from my eating disorder. I'm in a better place and I'm not taking life so seriously. I can't. Like, you never know what's really going to happen. And I'm just living my life as what happens. The outcome's going to be the same, whether you're sad, depressed, stressed about it, or happy. So I'm just focusing on things now that give me happiness. Like our podcast has been a huge thing for me, but I'm just doing things that are based around making myself feel good as a wife, as well as, a mom, a stepmom, obstacles that we're facing now. I'm dealing with infertility issues. We've been trying now for over a year, and the state of my period led my doctors to do some tests, and there's endometriosis. We knew I had PCOS, and there's things that are going on, and it's making it very difficult for me to get pregnant. And it was really hard for me to take on at first because I was like, this is karma from my abortion and whatever. But again, there's nothing that I can really do outside of doing the things that the doctors tell me to do. We have a fertility appointment in the near future, and I allow myself to take the time to feel things. I really do. Like when we found out that there was an issue, we went away for a weekend and we went to a cabin, and I allowed myself to be upset, and I was like, it's okay. And now I just feel like, what am I going to do if I can't have a baby? Then I have these two boys, and that's a blessing. And I'm just taking it with stride and just doing things for my self-care. I'm making sure that I'm working out for my mental health. I'm making sure that I'm doing things that I can control. I'm doing things like making sure that I can eat healthy foods to actually give my body nutrients. I'm making sure that I can go to sleep at a good time and make sure I'm rested. All those self-care things that I can control, are things that are helping me just deal with life, if that makes sense.
Yes. And that's all we can do is just keep going, surrender sometimes and keep focusing on the good. And I think that we have so much to look forward to coming. And I'm so happy that we're able to do this together. And, I'm really proud of you for opening up about such a dark thing that happened. And I think for any viewers that, didn't know us before, didn't know Kris before, I did want to add that the relationship between her and Sam was really public on social media. And so it's been, this is a big moment for you to finally talk about what actually happened and to share your side of it. And so I'm really proud of you for all of this. And I think that this is the end, and I'm excited for us to talk about more stories and overcoming more different things, and hopefully we can get some more people on here to talk about things that they've overcome. But I think that's all the time we have for today. So I just want to say bye, everybody.
Yes, bye. I'm going to be on a cruise when this episode comes out, so our major mic drop.
Yeah, she's dropping a bomb.
Here's my trauma. Bye.
Trauma dump bomb. I'm in the middle of the ocean. I have no cell service. Bye.
Yes. So, and I hope that everybody just isn't like too traumatized by my trauma. I hope I didn't really bring down the day, but yeah, thank you so much for this interview. It was
Yeah.
great.
And I'm proud of us for not having our awkward laugh in very traumatic moments.
Oh my God, I know. I know. But anyways, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next.
Okay, bye.